Hi everyone, just going to do a big video. It's going to be all rambly. I'm recording the audio to this on my phone, so that's why it doesn't sound as good. But yeah, you get what you get and you don't get upset. So there's a few things that I want to talk about broadly coming under the case debate and Karen Davis's investigation into GenSpec and associated organizations in regards to their connections to a website known as Virtuous Pedophiles, I think it is. Yeah, which is turning up some surprising results and resulting in lots of people resigning from or having their names removed from various websites. Yeah, I guess the I'm not sure which order to tackle it in. Um, I guess I'll do the case one first. Or maybe I'll do a bit of the dodgy stuff. It just seems like so crazy. One of the things that I found shocking about this was Claire Graham's reaction to Karen Davis's questioning. And not because I thought, like, it surprised me that somebody would get angry about what Karen was saying, particularly about the case stuff. But the level of unprofessionaling, the level of unprofessionalism, I guess, if that's a thing, that it led to, with her being like, why are you so essentially accusing Karen of being a pedophile? And that to me just seemed to be the perfect mirror image of when anyone would ever talk about child beauty pageants and say, this is fucking gross, why are you sexualizing children like this? And they would say, oh, it's you that's doing the sexualizing of the children. Except this was even more unfounded because it wasn't like an interpretation of cultural symbols. It was like literal black and white text saying these people are supporters of this website. Like in any other circles, this would be a massive red line. In particular, I think it's interesting to compare it to Milo Yiannopoulos. Like, Milo Yiannopoulos was able to say anything about anyone up until the point where he started to sympathize with pedophilia, essentially, and even his brand died. And so if your brand isn't like super edgelord, but instead is like, we're an organization for parents and children and shit, then I would steer away from the Milo Yiannopoulos type positions if I wanted to keep those organizations around. Because there's a very good point, which Karen Davis has raised before, and it's, what do you think the fucking conservatives are going to do when they get hold of this? When they realize that prominent organizations in the gender critical movement have their own Milo Yiannopoulos. What do you think the trans people are going to do when they find this shit out? Just telling Karen to shut up about it isn't going to fix that problem. It's going to mean it's going to come back way, like, she can't even afford a computer, you know? If that's your threat, someone who's barely online, then fucking batten down the hatches. There is a storm coming. So I guess to kind of try to weave these threads together, my opinion is that progressives were essentially tricked into adopting gender ideology. At least a lot of the actual people, the ideology was probably always destined to end up there because of its, assumptions. But the people were tricked into adopting gender ideology because of who they didn't want to be like. They perceived gender ideology as being, they perceived opposing gender ideology as being conservative, and therefore embracing it was seen to be liberal, progressive, feminist, etc., etc. And so most people didn't even really look into the issue because of who they didn't want to be like. And I think a similar thing has happened with the case debate, but in the opposite direction. So people have been not tricked, but people have taken this position a lot of times because of who they didn't want to be like. It was the other position, the idea that an XY chromosome in case equals a female. That position makes you Benjamin Boyce, or if it doesn't make you Benjamin Boyce, it makes you sympathetic to the people who destroyed Exelanzic's channel, etc., etc. So again, the argument is getting decided on who you want to be like or unlike, not on the actual merits of the argument itself. And I think I think that's affected to some extent Karen's the way some people see Karen. I don't think it's like, enough to determine, like, I'm not trying to suggest she shouldn't have this position. I think it would be an improvement. I don't think it's gonna ultimately prevent her from reaching her goals either way. But I do think that a lot of people who take the opposite position to Karen on the case debate can be tricked into opposing her efforts on the connection to virtuous pedophiles debate by saying, well, she's the one who hates the case people. And so in that sense, it can be used in a similar way to herd people. And so obviously, like, this isn't a dynamic that's found in any one demographic. It's something that every, I guess, political position has the ability to fall into these types of traps. And yeah, so one of the things has been, why is this issue blown up all of a sudden? And part of the reason why I think it has is because the radfems are wrong on it. And that's part of the reason why it's become such a thing, because it's the same reason why conservatives, like, what's his name? The guy that fucking Steven Crowder. Like, Steven Crowder does a bunch of gender identity stuff because the left is so wrong on gender identity that he can look smart just by doing this, through this one simple trick. And I think a similar thing is happening with the case debate, where it's like, these people you wouldn't normally be able to win a debate against, you can actually make look pretty silly pretty quickly by challenging their position on case. But that said, so I wanted to read you guys two debates. One was left on a Slightly Twisted Females site, and the other one was on Getter. I'll do the Slightly Twisted Female one first. She's taking Exelanzic's position, but she doesn't actually get into the debate. I was just debating with someone else in her comment section. And regardless of the fact that we disagree on this one issue, you should go subscribe to A Slightly Twisted Female. In particular, she's got this great interview or documentary on the murders that happened around the Michigan Women's Music Festival, and there was like a couple and their son who was murdered by this crazy trans activist. And I had always heard about this in sort of legend, but I hadn't seen anything concrete on it, so that was really cool. And yeah, so go check out her stuff. Anyway, I watched like the first 5 minutes of one of her videos, and then I wrote this comment because it was, enough for me to talk about what I already knew about. You seem to be switching between the phrase female phenotype and feminized phenotype as though they are the same thing, or at least the distinction between them has not been made clear. At 2:04, you say the one boy on TikTok who has a very female phenotype, and at 4:30, you say a feminized phenotype. The word very implies degree, and, as you say, sex is either one or the other. This is because the definition of sex is based on reproductive function, not looks. In all sexually dimorphic species, a phenotype is either male or female, not because of how it looks, but because of its biological function. It's about type and not degree. A vulva has a specific biological function. A vulva is not a feminized penis. It is a completely separate organ, which is part of a completely different phenotype, which refers to a genetic set of characteristics and not just how something looks. Phenotype is much closer as a concept to the idea of species than it is to the idea of an external look. You can get a different external look if you put a hat on. That changes your external look. You can't change your biological phenotype with surgery or a hat. It's a genetic set of characteristics. You can't change which genetic set of characteristics you were born into. The female hip bone is defined by a specific, which someone has pointed out to me is the pelvis, is defined by a specific biological function. It is possible to have masculine or feminine hip bones because female hip bones because masculine and feminine is about style while male and female is about reproductive function. There's a difference between a masculinized female hip bone and a male hip bone, and there's a difference between a feminized male hip bone and a female hip bone. Contrary to what the commenter was saying in regards to them thinking that you were all overly attached to the idea of a binary, I actually believe that you are the one arguing that sex is a spectrum by arguing that there are not two distinct human sex phenotypes, but instead one phenotype which can either be more masculinized or more feminized. That is truly destroying the sex binary. You also argued that trans people are changing their phenotype, presumably because you think that phenotype means how something looks, but phenotype is closer as a concept to a species. It's a set of particular genetics. Surgery cannot change your phenotype any more than it can change your species. Sticking feathers up your butt does not make you a chicken. Being born with feathers up your butt is another story. I still support and promote Exelanzic and think she's worth defending, even if she was incorrect about this point. I think that's important to clarify. Shutting down her channel and bullying her was not wrong because she was correct. It was wrong regardless. To which P, a user called P, says, "Hi, I have a question. You mentioned that a vulva is not a feminized penis, and presumably vice versa, but I believe that a penis and vulva are variants of the same types of the same tissue types, e.g. the glans of the penis is analogous to the clitoris. I believe the scrotal sac is derived from the same tissue which in females becomes part of the vagina." I've only ever heard TRAs say this type of thing before in order to argue that Tims are women. But anyway, it continues. So isn't it the case that we do start with the same undifferentiated tissues, and then in accordance with endocrinological exposure directed by genetics, the tissues become the male structure or the female structure? This is why intersex conditions like ambiguous genitalia exist, because a disruption in the development of a female can lead her to be born with a penis and she is misidentified as a boy. Likewise, it can be hard to tell a boy's undeveloped penis from an enlarged clitoris. So we start with male or female chromosomes, and it's those genes that direct an undifferentiated cell blob to develop with a masculine or feminine body form. But if things go wrong, you can get a male who has had zero male development. So what kind of development did they have? We agree that it's got to either be male or female, and they did after all develop, and we've just said 0% male development. So what would that leave as the only other option? Or theoretically, a chromosomal female who was forced through the pre-birth male puberty and possibly further male puberties. To which I said, "Hi P, thanks for your question. Again, you are switching from the term male structure or female structure to masculine or feminine body form without addressing the fact that these are not the same thing. As said previously, masculine is about style, while male is about function. A penis isn't always necessarily masculine, but it is always male on the basis that sex is defined by reproductive function. Putting a left shoe on a right foot does not make it a right shoe. This is because left and right are determined by the shoe's function and not which foot the shoe has the capacity to be placed on. Likewise, a penis is a male body part because of its reproductive function, regardless of where it appears. Also, plenty of radfems have put a lot of work into popularizing the phrase, "women don't have penises." Are you, and a slightly twisted female, suggesting that this is not true and that women can indeed have penises? Which, by the way, also means a male phenotype, bones, muscles, etc., regardless of whether the penis is fully formed. Phenotype refers to the whole body, inside and out, not just external looks. You cannot actually create a cow by taping together a bunch of cats. Why would you want that person in a women's space? How would women be able to police these spaces if it's okay for people with dicks to be in there? The argument a slightly twisted female makes that we should expand the definition of what a woman or man can be in order to include things like women with penises sounds very reminiscent of TRA talking points. To which P replied, "Right, I get that penis is fundamentally male, but I know that there are females who are born with a structure that appears to be a penis, e.g. Georgina Colin Campbell was raised as a boy because she had a penis or penis-like genitalia at least. She is female though, but this only became evident later and she was able to produce 2 biological children." To which I said, "Just as you treated feminine and female as synonymous, you now keep switching back and forth between referring to this person's genitalia as a penis, which you need to do in order to make your argument, and saying that it is penis-like, which you need to do in order to be in touch with reality. No, that's not a woman with a penis, that's a woman with masculinized genitalia. This is why it's important to learn the difference between male and masculine and female and feminine." So there's that little debate, and the next one was actually with someone who kind of agrees with me, and part of the reason I thought it was interesting is because one of Exa Lanzic's criticisms of all the people making my argument is that they're doing so in order to push trans stuff, and this, I think, this debate will show an example of that happening. So with this one, I kind of hijacked a debate that gender critical thinking was trying to have with Vanessa Vokey, but I thought gender critical thinking was doing such a bad job of arguing for the position I hold that I wanted to try and interrupt and stop that from happening anymore. So gender critical thinking said to Vokey, "I don't think you fully understand what's really going on here. If you did, I can't imagine you taking this stance. A good biologist looks at the whole organism, and 99% of case women's organism is female. This includes both primary and secondary sex characteristics." To which I said, 99% female is a dumb and contradictory way to explain what you're saying, especially since your argument rests on a sex binary and not degrees of sex, a spectrum. And gender critical thinking says, "I'm saying that the majority of the phenotype is female. The exception is the internal testes, which is not part of the female phenotype. How would you say it? Things can only be male or female. So the phenotype is female, the gonads are male. Sex of an organism is determined by function and not capacity of its phenotype. Just because you put a left inner sole into a right shoe does not make it a left shoe. No percentages anywhere. Everything is 100% male or female. then they have to start arguing things like men with vulvas exist or women with penises exist, which is actually breaking down the sex binary. But if you open with percentages, it's already over. To which gender critical thinking said, firstly, I'm not the biologist. Secondly, because I misunderstood who I was talking to and what was going on. But that's a side point. Secondly, androgen insensitivity syndrome, so not complete, but just partial androgen insensitivity syndrome, is indeed a spectrum. It also, from what I've seen, is not a clean spectrum, so certain parts and receptors can be affected to different degrees. At what part on the AIS spectrum is the female-male cutoff? To which I said, at the point where it produces a male phenotype, which can be determined by the hip bone, even with AIS, one either has a female phenotype or they don't. My guess is that most of them, maybe all, would not have this, and this would be part of the key difference between people with androgen insensitivity syndrome and complete androgen insensitivity syndrome. AIS may be a spectrum, but sex is not. To which they said, the line is defined by the pelvis? That's a new one for me. I'd like to see your receipts on this one. There is no intermediate pelvis that can develop on an AIS spectrum? ? To which I said, what? The line is defined by the phenotype. The phenotype can be identified by the pelvis. Humans are sexually dimorphic, so there is not a third phenotype containing a third pelvis. This is as silly as when Exelanzic said XY plus case equals a case phenotype. Both sides seem to struggle with the sex binary and want to create new categories while not really understanding what a phenotype is. And in this sense, I can see what Exelanzic is saying, in that it seems like these people, it's always a group. This particular person doesn't just want to argue that XY plus case equals female. They're arguing androgen insensitivity at all could potentially equal female. And that seems to be on the basis, paving the way for some kind of gender identity-esque thing. So I'm not saying that, like, there aren't people who have my position who are arguing it for different reasons than I am, but it's like the Palestine thing. Like, Nazis will join you on your anti-Israel crusade, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there is no legitimate critique of Israel to be had. Oh, plus the whole, thing about the House episode. So one of the things in the House episode, they're like, take this to House was right. But one of the things that the House episode was saying was that women with case are visually indistinguishable from women without case. The other thing is there's the joke about, like, oh, you wanted to have sex with her, so you're gay. But by the same token, you're also saying that any lesbian that wanted to have sex with her is a straight woman. And in that sense, this analysis undermines homosexuality and heterosexuality in a similar way to the way that trans ideology undermines it, because trans ideology basically argues that there aren't two distinct phenotypes, and that you can be looking at a female phenotype, but it's actually a male phenotype, or you can be looking at a male phenotype and it's actually a female phenotype. And this says exactly the same thing. You can be looking at any woman and you can never know that they are in fact a woman until you've done the appropriate, gonadal karyotype testing or whatever you need to do. Anyway, that's my rambling for the moment on those particular subjects. I'll be back soon with more.
You know we're coming live from Triple R, taking Aussie rap music on a different path. The kid who spits the sickest bars like it isn't hard. On that breakthrough debut that's sitting in the charts. Another month I'll be a bigger star than Jimmy Barnes. It's pretty simple, you don't like it, you can kiss my ass. I'm out having rich dinners cause I'm living large. You're at home drinking Vic Bitter trying to fix your car. It's a laugh, mate, you try to call that hip hop. Shit, as soon as I turn it on, I just switch off. Even if I just burn it, it's like I'm ripped off. People probably heard it, that's why your shit flopped. Yes. Let's go that next banger. Yeah, go the nextie. Is this fun?
I'm having a good time.